the book launch. We're going to be launching 3 books on socio-economic and governance priorities for Pakistan. I'd really appreciate it if you guys switch off your phones or put them on silent. And the moderator for our event would be Abdul Qadir. There he is. And Abdul Qadir is currently working as program coordinator and advisor at the Frederick Ebert Stiftung, Pakistan. He has experience of initiating large number of innovative programs in areas of politics and society, including policy reforms and dialogue in Pakistan. Thank you. Over to you.
Gentlemen, welcome you on behalf of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. I have many challenges, but one of them is that I have 3 speakers, 3 towering speakers to speak about 3 books, but also another session which is also a competing session that is going on. But looking at the audience here, I'm very encouraged here. Let me invite our panelists here, and then I'll introduce the topic, and then I'll try to manage the time. First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Pasha, Sakib Sherani Sahab, and Vaqar Ahmed Sahab, who is also around here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. If you would like to speak, take a seat. Please take your seat. Sometimes we feel challenging ourselves that should we speak in English and in Urdu. सुबह हमारी डिस्कशन हुई कि it should be bilingual. अगर आप सब एग्री हैं तो we keep it as a bilingual. क्या? शुक्रिया. दूसरी बात, फ्रीडरिश एबर्ट स्टिफ्टुंग जो आपकी होस्ट है इस सेशन के लिए, उनके बिहाफ पे मैं आप तमाम का मशकूर भी हूँ. इट्स पॉपुलरली नोन एज जर्मन फाउंडेशन फ्रीडरिश एबर्ट स्टिफ्टुंग. ये फाउंडेशन जो है, इट्स अ लेगेसी ऑफ द जर्मन फर्स्ट डेमोक्रेटिकली इलेक्टेड जर्मन प्रेसिडेंट फ्रीडरिश एबर्ट. 1925 में इट वाज एस्टेब्लिश इन जर्मनी, एंड नाउ especially after 60s, it has spread its international work, and this foundation has now more or less 100 offices around the world. My German resident representative, Rolf Pasha, who is unfortunately not here, he was here last year in this room on this very session, and because of visa problems and all those difficulties that many international organizations are facing recently. The foundation is a value promotion organization, value promotion of social democracy, value promotion social justice in politics, social justice in society, social justice in economy. Also promoting dialogue for better understanding, for promoting peace, and these are the values of democracy, social democracy, that we work all over the world. We started a work on economy of tomorrow about 4 years ago in Pakistan, and the inspiration came from the international discussion about after this global financial crisis 2008, and this year it will be the 10th anniversary of that crisis. The idea was that दुनिया भर में जो क्राइसिस हैं वो सिर्फ फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस नहीं है, अगरचे वो उसकी मैनिफेस्टेशन फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस की सूरत में सामने आए. इकोलॉजिकल क्राइसिस हैं, सोशल क्राइसिस हैं, और वो आपस में इस तरह मर्ज होकर उनकी जो इंटेंसिटी है वो एक नई सतह की सामने आई है. क्या वजूहात है उनके सामने के लिए? एक वजूद तो बड़ी सामने आई कि जो प्रेजेंट इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज़ हैं, इवन इकोनॉमिक मॉडल्स हैं, इकोनॉमिक साइंसेस जो हैं, वो सब डिस्क्रेडिट हुए इस सारे क्राइसिस के अंदर. और ये सूरत हाल पैदा होने के बाद एक नए मुकालमे का आगाज़ हुआ कि किस तरीके से हम सोसाइटीज़ के लॉन्गर टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव को और सुप्रीम विजन को सामने रखते हुए इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज़ को मुरतब करें, जिनमें एक सुप्रीम विजन जो कि हर सोसाइटी का होता है कि आवर सोसाइटी हैज़ टू बी अ गुड सोसाइटी, एंड वो गुड सोसाइटी जो है वो कैसे इस्टेब्लिश हो, उसके लिए इकोनॉमिक फाउंडेशंस क्या होंगी, वो एक बड़ा बुनियादी सवाल है कि कौन सी इकोनॉमिक फाउंडेशंस हैं. दिस इज़ व्हाट वी थॉट कि इट्स अ टॉपिक ऑफ इकोनॉमी एंड वी स्टार्टेड दिस वर्क. वी नेम इट एज इकोनॉमी ऑफ टुमारो, कि इकोनॉमी ऑफ टुमारो की जहतें क्या हो. मुझे खुशी है कि पाकिस्तान में FES ने इसी मुकालबे का आगाज़ किया और पाकिस्तान के इंतहाई डिस्टिंग्विश्ड इकोनॉमिस्ट, सोशल साइंटिस्ट, सोशल एक्टिविस्ट जो इस मुकालबे का हिस्सा रहे हैं. कुछ हमारे साथ पैनल में भी हैं, लेकिन कुछ हज़रात जो हैं वो इस मजमे में भी तशरीफ़ रखते हैं. आइडिया ये कि इकॉनमी जो है वो सिर्फ इकोनॉमिस्ट ही की डिस्कशन नहीं है, या सिर्फ it's a larger discussion for the society, and that is what also one of the angle of economy of tomorrow. So we established this panel, and this panel started working on these different ideas, different issues, and I'm glad that the work we have done are now almost finished in terms of creation of knowledge, creation of understanding. We have produced many publications which are there. But recently, all these works are also being consolidated. And the first book that came out is Growth and Inequality in Pakistan. This is volume 1. This is authored by Dr. Pasha, Dr. Hafiz Pasha, who is sitting with us. And it's a privilege to share with you, Dr. Pasha, this stage. Then we have also institutional reforms, and produced by Sakib Sherani Sahab. And this report came out about 5 months ago, Sakib Sherani Sahab. We have some discussion and launches in Islamabad already, and I'm glad that this book is also part of our launching this discussion here. And then glad that Vaqar Sahab, his own book, although he's part of our panel, his ideas are common. Oxford University has published his book on Pakistan's agenda for economic reforms. So my challenge is that how to first of all deal with the stature of this panel, and 3 books and 1 hour, and then Zia Muhyiddin on the side. So I have to explain to you. I have to introduce my panelist, Dr. Hafiz Pasha. Dr. Pasha is a distinguished economist. We don't need to introduce, but one thing that Dr. Pasha reminds us that he has been at the top of all the important policy decision making institution in the country, and he was the first distinguished citizen of Pakistan to be part of the United Nations as the Assistant Secretary of the United Nations. So this is a distinction Dr. Pasha holds here. Dr. Pasha has been the Vice Chancellor of Karachi University. He's been the Dean and Director of Institute of Business Administration, and is Professor Emeritus right now with the Beacon House National University. And also, as I mentioned, that he led the panel of economists, led the panel of Economy of Tomorrow, which was established by FES Pakistan. Sakib Sherani Sahab has a wide-ranging experience in public policy, corporate management, financial service, and also not-for-profit organizations. He has served as Principal Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Finance and other important public positions. And he has his own firm, a consultancy firm that he operates from Islamabad. Vaqar Ahmed is also a very known figure for this literature festival. This is the 4th time, Vaqar Sahab, you are present here. Last year we also had him the pleasure of this on this panel. The leading Pakistani economist and Deputy Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute. One important thing that congratulations to STPI, the recent ranking in the world think tanks is the #1 Pakistani think tank. And our think tank FES is rated as the #2 think tank in worldwide. So that's also a matter of privilege to cooperate, but also to inform our audience here. अगर मैं इस सवाल से आगाज़ करूँ, ये 3 किताबें जो हैं, ख़ास तौर पे ये किताब जो ग्रोथ एंड इक्वालिटी इन पाकिस्तान, इससे आगाज़ करते हुए डॉक्टर साहब, आपकी इस किताब में I'm sorry, I'm a little bit comfortable here by walking, so I'm not sitting here. If I want to sit, I will sit there. इस किताब में आपने इन दो बड़े अहम मौज़ूआत, दो बड़े अहम एरियाज़ हैं, ग्रोथ एंड इनइक्वालिटी, इस पर गुफ्तगू की है और ये बताया है कि किस तरीके से बैड परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ ग्रोथ एंड सिचुएशन, जो बैड सिचुएशन ऑफ इनइक्वालिटी है, ये दोनों जो है बाहम मिलकर एक ऐसी सूरत हाल पैदा हो गई है जिसके ज़रिए हमारे जो लॉन्ग टर्म ग्रोथ के प्रॉस्पेक्ट्स हैं, लॉन्ग टर्म डेवलपमेंट के प्रॉस्पेक्ट्स हैं, वो पाकिस्तान के लिए बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है। अब इस किताब में आपके वो कौन से नुकात हैं, किस तरह से आपने इसको इंक्लूड किया है, किस तरीके से एनालाइज किया है, वी वुड लाइक टू हियर।
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me. Let me first start by saying that I consider it a real privilege that economists are being treated as part of a literary festival. This is for us, because traditionally we have been referred to as the dismal science. So thank you very much, the organizers, for doing so. Now, what I'm doing at this stage in my life is trying to consolidate what I have worked on, researched on, and occasionally made policy on the economy of Pakistan. And why did I choose the topic, the question that has just been asked, growth and inequality? We all know that since the 90s, Pakistan's economy has lost its growth momentum. Our growth rate has averaged generally much below 5%. And this is not enough for us to really move up in the ranks of countries. What is equally worrying is that we have high and rising inequality. The evidence is that over the last 15 years or so, the gap between the rich and the poor of Pakistan has risen to about 12 to 1. And in the last few years, it has increased the gap by 1/3. This is the extent to which inequality is increasing in this country. And really the fundamental question is, how do we manage a very difficult situation of low growth and rising inequality? Let me first start by thanking my various MPhil and PhD students who have worked with me in the preparation of this book over the last many years. I would like also to recognize the support that I've received from various institutions, including FES and other research institutions in Karachi, my original alma mater, and also from now the institutions in Lahore. Ladies and gentlemen, the book is in in 2 volumes with 7 sections in the first volume. I'll quickly tell you what those sections are: population growth, economy, the state, the IMF program, which has been around for the last 3 years, what's been happening to growth, what have we done with investment, and very importantly, the last 2 sections on employment and inequality. And in particular, I'm going to focus on the last 2, but let me first tell you on the results of our research, which contained some surprises, some pleasant, some perhaps not so pleasant. And we have tried to quantify and measure some areas which have never been measured before. So it's a courageous piece of research that has been undertaken by some very outstanding students with my support. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by highlighting to you 2 very well-defined factors which have constrained our growth, particularly over the last 15 years or so. The first is the impact of the war on terror. And with all due respects to the government of Pakistan, the methodology that has been used to quantify the costs that this country has borne, the methodology is seriously flawed. We have had to rely on a very different methodology which focuses on what are direct costs and indirect costs. The direct costs are the rise in the security expenditure that we have had to incur. And the indirect costs are the economic consequences in terms of lower investment, unemployment, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, when we did this quantification with a proper methodology based on international best practice, our results revealed that the cost is potentially much higher than revealed by the government of Pakistan. If we include what we call the multiplier effect of lost investment, the cost could be as much as close to $180 billion over the last 15 years or so. So each year we have had to incur a cost of $11 to $12 billion. And this is in relation to what the Americans have been saying. We are giving you $33 billion or so. This country has borne the cost, which is almost something like 5.5 times the support that we have received. We have borne an extraordinarily high cost, not only in terms of lives of the people, but in terms of the economy. And with all due respect to the government of Pakistan, they have been floating this number around of $123 billion. That is incorrect. The cost we have borne as a country is much, much higher. The second point I'd like to make to you is this: there is this kind of growing optimism about the load shedding situation in Pakistan, power load shedding. I and my students and my colleagues, of course, we have tried to quantify precisely what has been the cost in terms of the economy and the growth of load shedding that this country has experienced since the last decade or more. And here again, the results are very striking. Even for the year 2015-16, for which NEPRA, the regulatory agency, has released the data, the costs are still high. They are lower than what they used to be, say, in 2011 or so, but they're still high. Ladies and gentlemen, we have done a survey of 1,000 industrial, commercial, agricultural units and domestic households to get this information and do this analysis, again, on the basis of scientific methodology. I am sorry to tell you that in 2015-16, for which the last data is available, the cost to our country of power load shedding was 1,575 billion rupees, close to $16 billion. I mean, clearly this has impacted on poverty. This has impacted on the quality of lives of the people. And the tragedy behind this is that a lot of it could have been avoided with sensible policy and far better management. So this is a very striking figure, and something like roughly $3.5 billion of our exports have been damaged or affected by the lack of electricity. And over 1 million jobs have been lost due to load shedding. Ladies and gentlemen, let me turn to some interesting figures and results which are based on the work by a large number of students, and they are numbers which have never been presented before in Pakistan. The first is, let me tell you what the employment situation looks like. Over the last 3 to 4 years, Pakistan has created jobs for hardly 700,000 people per year. The annual increase in our labor force is anywhere between 1.5 to 1.7 million people. So we have added less than 50% to the jobs required. And the government, of course, prefers to give employment figures which are somewhat, with all due respects again, manipulated. There are 3 things about employment which are extremely worrying and have fundamental implications for Pakistan. The first is we are not using our educated workers. The highly educated workers in Pakistan have an unemployment rate 3 times the national average, almost 17 to 18%. 1 graduate or postgraduate out of 6 is unemployed. This is a tragic waste of manpower. The other point to note, and even this is more important, you will be amazed to know that this youth bulge of ours is not being productively absorbed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have estimated that there are 4 million male youth in this country, 4 million, let me repeat, who are idle, who are neither in the labor force nor are they studying. They're just idle. Now you can imagine what happens to idle minds. With all due respects, if we don't tackle this problem, this is a fodder for the kind of extremism and perhaps even crime that we have seen. We have to focus on youth employment and youth absorption as perhaps the single most important criterion in our national policy making, and I hope to God that in their election manifestos, the political parties will make this the #1 item on their agenda, because this is what will ensure a degree of peace and stability. Let me turn to some other numbers which I have been constrained not to give for some time. I thought I would bring them out in the book, but they are extremely revealing numbers. For the first time, after the pioneering work done by Dr. Kaisa Bengali, we have updated the provincial growth estimates up to 2016 and 17. The first time I am making available the growth performance of the 4 provincial economies of Pakistan. There are some surprises. Over the 16-year period or so, perhaps you might find this surprising. The fastest growing provincial economy of Pakistan has been Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Not because Naeem is sitting here, it's in the book, it's written. So, and the reason is a very interesting one. Despite being in the front line of the war on terror, this is a province which receives over 30 to 35% of foreign and domestic remittances. And this has imparted an incredible amount of dynamism, both in terms of demand for services, demand for housing, and particularly in terms of the informal economy. This is the only province of Pakistan which in the last 16 years has shown a steady growth rate of above 5%. The national average is 4.5%. How about Sindh? Sindh performed wonderfully well in the Musharraf era and showed a growth rate of almost 6% or more. But since then, it has stumbled. And there have been years, in fact, when the growth rate in Sindh, particularly because of Karachi, has actually been negative in few years. Now it's back to a growth rate of about 2 to 3%. So it's not doing too well in recent years. The real problem, ladies and gentlemen, is our complete failure in ensuring and promoting the development of Balochistan. The province of Balochistan has shown a growth rate over the last 16 years of much less than 3% only. And this is a real tragedy. And finally, let me just conclude by focusing on the human development indicators at the provincial level. Thanks to Karachi, Sindh has the highest level of human development, but the rest of Sindh, almost all districts are at the extremely low level of human development. Punjab is second, followed by KPK, and here again Balochistan has an index which is way below the average for Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, 54% of the districts of Pakistan, accounting for roughly about 40% of the population, are characterized by extraordinarily low levels of human development. There are only 4 districts of Pakistan which do well in terms of international comparison: Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, and interestingly, Rawalpindi. Faisalabad and other big cities are not there. Let me conclude by saying that I hope this is in the nature of an appetizer. And I've got another volume 2 to come, which has even got some more interesting revelations, particularly on what's happening to poverty, what's happening to income inequality, what's happening to wealth inequality, how the state has been captured by the elite, so on and so forth. And inshallah, if still invited, next year we will present volume 2. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. I think it's already way forward and some solutions. I think if you move to Sakib Sherani Sahab, the problems, this problem landscape that was given by Pasha Sahab, you started looking into these institutional reforms and its linkages to the problem of economic development. Please inform us, please let us know what are these kind of relationship and why this is important to study.
Right.
And maybe you also like to lace your arguments also with the way forward as well.
Right. Thank you, Qadir Sahab. तो बेसिकली अगर कॉन्टेक्स्ट इसका हम सेट कर दें, डॉक्टर साहब ने तो कर दिया है ग्रोथ के हवाले से और इनइक्वालिटी के हवाले से, बट इफ़ आई कैन जस्ट रीइटरेट जस्ट वन और टू थिंग्स. पाकिस्तान की जो इकोनॉमी है इज़ व्हाट वी कॉल इन सेक्युलर or long run, so secular is not a pun, but in a long run decline. And the two ways of looking at it. Ek to comparing Pakistan's performance with its own past. So what we find is if you look at the last 5-year moving average of GDP growth of the last 10 years, we're less than half of what we were achieving till the 60s, 70s and 80s. And if you compare Pakistan to South Asia, we are clearly the sick man of South Asia, our economy. Because, I mean, for example, if you look at, and it's not a recent phenomenon. अगर आप 1981 से देखें, for example, Pakistan का per capita income growth is the lowest in terms of the multiple of increase for all of South Asia. And of course, I'm excluding Nepal, Bhutan, and Afghanistan, maybe West Asia. So it's actually the weakness of the performance in the economy has been around for a while. ढक्की छुपी रही है growth rates की वजह से, but so in both comparisons we're not doing too well. And it's not just economic performance. Of course, we have to look at wider than economic performance. It's development outcomes. So Pakistan's HDI rank, for example, in the Human Development Index, consistently at 144. And finally, mashallah, say we've broken the mold. Not we've improved from 144, we've slipped from 144 to 147. So after many years, we were flatlined at 144, and now we've even slipped from that. In many other ways, you look at how much Pakistan is spending in terms of education. The education budget in Pakistan is the 172nd lowest in the world. And actually, जो UNESCO का database है उसमें 173 countries हैं, 174 हैं. So we're right at the bottom. Health, similar, right? So the point is, how do you explain all this? It's not cyclical. It's not happened in just 1 or 2 years. It's not happened in the last 5 years because of the war on terror or because of a bad cotton crop or barishein nahi hui. It's secular. It's something which is going on for a long while. That loss in growth momentum जो Pasha साहब ने बात की है. So we have to step back, what could be the possible explanation, and one जो बहुत बुनियादी और fundamental चीज़ जो हमें differentiate करती है from countries that are dynamic is state capacity. So the fraying of state capacity in Pakistan, the fraying of the institutional framework in Pakistan is a very large explanatory sort of factor for this. So you asked कि क्या channels हैं? How does that impact the loss in economic potential? Because we're also losing potential, by the way. जब इतनी देर से economy perform नहीं कर रही होती है, then potential growth rate also comes down. And that's exactly what's happened to Pakistan. Our ability to create jobs for the youth that Pasha Saab mentioned is also declining. So we really have to think about this. So what are the channels? One is the obvious factor. When we say कि हमारी education budget low है, so one thing that crops up in the lazy consensus is because Pakistan में पैसे नहीं है to spend on education. So one channel is we're not collecting enough revenues, tax revenues, to be able to finance our development needs. True? But that's only one part of the problem. Second, related to this is two other things. We're not collecting from the right sources. So industry in Pakistan is paying 73% of the tax in Pakistan. Many of Pakistan's elite, 5 to 6 million, are escaping that burden, right? Very conveniently. So that's the other part of the problem. And the third part of the problem is, all related to institutions, is जो पैसे collect भी हो रहे हैं, they're not going to education budgets, really. I mean, they're nominally being shown under the education budget, but they're actually being siphoned through wasteful public contracts or collusion with public contractors. So orange line trains and whatever the works everybody knows. Or in fact, even when we hire teachers, so we say कि educational outcomes क्यों नहीं improve हो रहे हैं, because the teachers we hire are not based on meritocracy. They're based on either biradri or on political affiliation, and they've been given a task कि next election आएगी तो you'll be the returning officer, तो आपने ये काम करना है. So you cannot expect कि वो educational outcome improve होगा. So this is how the institutional framework feeds into the bad sort of outcomes that we're seeing on the economy. There are other factors as well. So let me just list one or two very quickly. Tax की मैंने बात की that we're not collecting from the right sources. In fact, what we've done since 2013 is we've resorted to what I've called predatory taxation, right? And that taxation means basically कि हमने जो existing taxpayers हैं उनसे हमने tax collect करने शुरू कर दिए and therefore set up a perverse incentive. We've increased the differential between the tax incidence of the formal taxpayers and the informal economy. And that's created an incentive for people to informalize. So that affects economic performance as well.
Thank you very much. Are we raising for 15 minutes? Please raise it after 1 hour. Thank you very much. Vaqar Sahab, I think one important point in your book that you started, with the continuity of what Sakib Sahab is saying, that we lost our potential, we lost our potential to grow because we are not competitive enough. And this is where you have emphasized in your book. This is, of course, serious, but how serious is this? Would you like to mention briefly and what we can do about it, if you can also combine?
Thank you very much. So, Qadir, over a period of around 2.5 years, we conducted an enterprise level survey of around 4,000. Let me see if this works. Is it better? Is it better? So, over the course of previous 2.5 years, we conducted a survey of around 4,000 enterprises all across Pakistan, And there are four main issues that they highlight, which are sort of prerequisites for competitiveness, not just determinants, but prerequisites. First, of course, as the book highlights, is that a weak rule of law is certainly not good for economic growth. Second, our weakness to implement the legal and judicial reforms, particularly those which are related to business disputes, is something which has sort of increased the cost for businesses in their dealing. The third key issue is that corruption in the governance of economic institutions, and the very fact that institutions like, for example, anti-corruption cells or NAB are already there, still there is rampant corruption that has sort of heard, or may I say perceived corruption, so to say. And then fourth, they also highlight that our weakness to implement the civil service reforms, particularly in institutions which deal with, as Mr. Sherani was saying, with tax governance, is something which is keeping the competitiveness at bay. Now, the argument that we make is that there are policies at hand. There are policies which the government has at its hand to influence the determinants of competitiveness. Now, of course, the four most common determinants would be the cost and availability of credit, capital, the cost and availability of quality labor, of course, ability to innovate, and of course, availability of enabling infrastructure, as we call it. Now, all four of them can be influenced by government policy. Now, how do we move forward from this point? First of all, there's a need for synchronization across our various economic policies. Due to the paucity of time, I'll just give example of one. the missing link between fiscal policy and trade policy. The very fact that you have a trade policy which talks about export promotion, but you have a fiscal policy which has anti-export bias, so to say. So just to extend what Dr. Pasha or Sherani Sahab was saying, we now have layers of tax administration which are sort of hurting the compliance, which have increased the compliance cost of genuine taxpayers. So if we have to take a wild guess, how many taxes do our enterprises face now? It's 56. It's not just highest in the region, it's one of the highest in the world. 56 annual taxes. How many institutions do we have which collect taxes? Not just one FBR, there are 13 institutions. So if I am an entity which works across Pakistan, I need to comply with 13 different tax departments. Each one of them have different laws, so to say. So So just to sort of conclude, there are 3 or 4 key solutions that we need to go with. First of all, the regulatory burden on our businesses has greatly increased. The last regulatory impact assessment that we had in Pakistan was in 2005. We must conduct a new RIA. How much regulatory burden are our businesses carrying? And of course, create remedies for that. Second, we need to help our small and medium enterprises to graduate into becoming larger entities, to graduate into becoming exporting entities. And one can only do that if you help them in getting product certifications as well as compliance requirements. Third, lock the energy costs for at least 5 years. The profit and loss statements of our businesses are greatly getting distorted due to the changing energy costs. And fourth, lock the tariff structure for at least 5 years so that there should be some certainty to our exporting entities. So I just stop over here and
we still have a few minutes for some questions. I would like to pick, let's say, 4 questions from the audience. Please refer to the respective panelist, or if it is a general. Ladies and gentlemen also, I would like to alternate. Yes, please, you raise the first one, and then, yeah, you will be second. Yes, please. Do we have a mic here, or you can use this one? Because we don't have time. Thank you.
My question is to anyone who chooses to answer. जो हमने यहाँ बातें की हैं इकोनॉमी के हवाले से और पाकिस्तान के ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट इंडेक्स के हवाले से, तो हम इतने पीछे हैं दूसरे मुल्कों से, तो जो दुनिया में जो सारी डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही है इन टर्म्स ऑफ ऑटोमेशन, इन टर्म्स ऑफ आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, इन टर्म्स ऑफ जो डिबेट्स हो रही हैं कि द फ्यूचर ऑफ वर्क, के जॉब्स होंगी भी कि नहीं होंगी, तो उसमें हम कहाँ हैं फिर?
This is to the entire panel. How can we fast track from higher education in terms of meeting the demands of the employers, apart from the traditional university system? We have so many online resources available. How do we actually do that?
Take one question from the back, please. Yes, sir. Yes. Who's the lady first? The lady.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nighat Mir and I represent an NGO called the Hunar Foundation. I want to ask you all sitting there, because we deeply respect your knowledge and your expertise. 67% I think of our population is youth. And your think tanks and your policies and your recommendations should include that 67% who have no sense of direction, because they can do matriculation and there's no point in them going for a university education. So what is being done? Because there'll be a wasted generation and there'll be a cost on the country.
My name is Mehtab Kareem and I am a demographer by profession. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Pasha, for producing a very good volume, and I'm so glad to see that your first chapter is on population growth. We have always talked about it, and generally demographers have complained, but economists don't consider population as an indigenous variable, and I think he has rightly done so. I have a question here. You must have been reading in the press that particularly the government of Sindh has been complaining about the census results, whereby Sindh has been under-enumerated, the population of Sindh, to a great extent, and recently the Senate has formed a commission on census, and I happen to be a member representing Sindh there. What I see here, Dr. Pasha, that you have not talked much about Sindh. That, okay, there has been a lot of dispute about Karachi's population, perhaps under-enumerated or underestimated by the tune of 4 to 5 million, Sindh by a number of 6 million. I think it will have a larger impact on NFC award. I would like you to comment on that, please. Thank you.
Let me first thank all of you for some very useful questions. I will focus on 2 or 3, and then of course my very able panelist colleagues will respond to the others. The first and perhaps the last question needs to be taken up. You see, the problem has been that the urban population has been defined on the basis of local government boundaries. And one of the problems is that in Karachi's case, about at least 1.5 million population is outside the effective city of Karachi, which is the wrong way to do. In fact, if anything, we have overstated Lahore's population, because Lahore's population has been allowed to be far bigger. The other surprising finding is that and this is arisen partly because of the difficulty we have between what's known as the de facto findings versus the de jure findings. The de facto findings are taking people wherever they are. The de jure findings is to get some sense as to where they originally come from. And I have a feeling that particularly in the case of Balochistan and frontier, there has been this Afghan refugee factor which has come in and given their shares a big jump. NFC award, like the Indians have done, we might wish to wait the 2 censuses and not necessarily only go back on 1 census until it's finalized. We only have the provisional results. I'll take one more question on youth. And Madam, we have focused on what I call the potentially working youth, which is 15 to 24, the international ILO definition. There are 19 million such youths in Pakistan, and what amazes us is that and if you were to include the female youth, the idleness, the absence of marriage, if you like, only 30% of the girls at this age are married. There's an enormous amount of wastage of educated youth and manpower. Now, the problem is partly on the supply side. I agree totally with that. We have to make our education more relevant, more market-oriented. We may have to give far more emphasis rather than to higher education to technical and secondary and vocational education. But the problem doesn't end there. The problem is that the economy just is not growing enough to absorb all kinds of workers. And in fact, if you were to truly estimate the unemployment rate, because the Pakistan Bureau fudges it a bit, today your unemployment rate is in excess of 10% and almost 25% for graduate workers and close to 17 to 18% for youth. These are shattering numbers. We have never seen them before in the history of our country. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quick comment. जो पहला question था. So about two months back, I was on another panel. मेरे साथ one of Pakistan's leading exporters was sitting, and we were. So what you've asked is extremely relevant, because what we are trying to do is basically fight the battles we should have won and conquered in 60s and 70s and 80s in terms of the economic structure. And developments globally are really sort of exceeding at such a fast pace. So he told me basically, he said, hum productivity ki baat karte. By the way, the productivity numbers are so bad, and this is also an institutional sort of related factor because of weak education and not spending enough on technical and skill development and technical education. Pakistan's productivity growth is but 1/3 or almost 1/4 of India's and 1/6 or 1/7 of China's, right? And on top of that, so he was saying he competes with Vietnam. In fact, he's thinking now of setting up a factory in Vietnam because Vietnam has moved from really competitive workers to extremely competitive robots. In doing what? In basic, so what we used to think, garment manufacture is low wage and whatever, they're producing 12 times the amount of the Pakistani worker in a Pakistani factory. They're producing, that robot is producing 12 times more garments now at obviously 1/12 the cost. So that's the kind of change that we have to compete with as well.
Can I just ask a supplementary
Yes,
question?
we'll come
Can I
back.
ask a supplementary question to this?
Okay.
Which is that Bangladesh seems to do it better than us.
Right.
Come to that question later.
Yeah. So maybe you can answer because it's also related to...
I think this is a very important point, and one of the things, just to link up to the first question as well, कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो कि हमें ही करनी होती हैं, of course, और वो कोई बाहर से आकर नहीं कर सकता. Case in point is CPEC. So CPEC is, of course, not a new phenomenon if you compare it with Pakistan of 1950s and 60s. The Americans gave us the dams, the roads, and everything at that time. Now it's China giving us the same thing. It's the way you use that endowment. It's the way you put in place governance mechanisms for infrastructure. चूंकि वो गवर्नेंस मैकेनिज्म इन प्लेस नहीं थे, आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर वेयर एंड टीयर हुआ, उसकी आपने मेंटेनेंस नहीं किया, अल्टीमेटली ब्रेक डाउन हो गया, ऑफ कोर्स. सो देयर आर थिंग्स व्हिच वी नीड टू डू आवरसेल्व्स एंड वी आस्क questions. For example, how can CPEC benefit my own private sector? It'll only benefit if I'm prepared enough to set up those special economic zones जिनकी feasibility अभी तक बन नहीं पा रही. It'll only benefit if I give dividends of CPEC to my neighbors, if I regionally integrate in terms of trade and value chains, अब ये वो चीज़ें हैं जिनके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ट्रेड फैसिलिटेशन मेजर्स हमें लेने हैं. एज आई सेड, वी आर नॉट implementing our trade policy in letter or spirit. It remains a document.
Can I just respond to the Bangladesh question, because I had the privilege of when I was in the United Nations, Bangladesh was one of the countries that I was asked to look after by the Secretary General. This is about 10 years ago. You see, there are two reasons why Bangladesh has had a certain competitive advantage. The first is that being a least developed country, they've had access to a multitude of concessions, especially given by the European Union and by the United States and so on. So that has helped them. The other reason, which is a sad reason, and I had to fight, and at that time Begum Khalda Zia was the Prime Minister. So on behalf of the UN, we took up this human rights issue. Most of the workers in garment factories are women. And you go to the Chittagong area, you go to the export processing zone, you will see thousands of women. Do you know, a decade ago, the monthly salary of those women in the export processing zone of Chittagong was $30. $30 a month. And those girls were putting in 12 to 16 hours a day. So there's an element of gender exploitation and weak, cheap labor. And that is, of course, given the Indian and the Bangladeshi industrialists an edge over the rest.
Is the productivity higher than the Pakistani?
Not really. It's the wage rate. The productivity is somewhat higher, let's say a difference of about 40 to 60%. That's sufficient because they put in long hours. You see, our minimum wages, although I entirely support them, are not in line with the minimum wage, say, in Bangladesh.
Questions?
because it's related to the broader theme जो हम बात कर रहे हैं institutions की. So आपको बहुत सारों को आपको याद होगा 2013 में या 12 में Why Nations Fail आई थी किताब. And the basic question that book asks is why are some countries putting more money into education and others are not doing that? And it's related to the institutional framework. So in the case of I think Bangladesh as well, one thing they've got right and we haven't is they have a focused development paradigm. There's a national consensus कि वहाँ जब strike भी होती है तो जो containers होते हैं या export shipments होती हैं या जो export factories होती हैं वो खुली रहती हैं. So there is this huge consensus कि export led growth जो है वो बांग्लादेश में होनी है और we don't have that.
More questions. Let's say two questions. Maybe I'll start with one, and then young fellow is there, and then Marisa. Let's be very quick, short.
My question is to Dr. Pasha. When you spoke of exacerbating income inequalities and the taxation shrinking for the top 1%, Professor Stiglitz in the US has similar ideas about the US, and the same thing is happening there. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, how much of this is linked to bad governance, and how much is it attributed to the Washington consensus?
A very good question. I wish we had more time to answer this question. Let me just say, of course, yes, certainly.
So my question is, how to break the nexus of low growth and inequality that we talked about, and secondly, how we can get rid of the elite capture in our country.
Just about to say that. Yeah.
मेरा सवाल सर ये है कि क्या डिफरेंस है पाकिस्तान में और इन मालिक में कि वो आगे बढ़ गए या वहीं पे खड़े हैं और उसका हल क्या है?
ये क्वेश्चन पूछने के लिए हमारा करंट पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर है, हमारा जो करंट पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर है उसके अंदर ये कैपेबिलिटी या रियलाइजेशन है जो हमारे इकनॉमिक इश्यूज़ हैं. एक एग्जांपल दूंगा कि जो सेनेट की कमेटी है आईटी के हवाले से, उसके चेयरमैन जो है वो शाही सैयद साहब हैं. तो कितनी रियलाइजेशन है हमारी पॉलिटिकल क्लास में इन इकनॉमिक इश्यूज़ के हवाले से कि अगर उधर विजन है, क्योंकि आप लोग गवर्नमेंट टीम्स के भी पार्ट रहे हैं, तो यू नो बेटर, प्लीज इनलाइटन अस.
I think we should take the question.
Yeah, I think because
एक question now.
On this side, because next time, the last.
एक और भी है वहाँ.
My name is Mahmood Akhtar Chima and I'm country representative of IUCN. I would like to know, Dr. Saab, what percentage of this job is the people getting in the brown sector and what percentage in the greener sector? The countries that we are giving example, India, China, Bangladesh, they are making far more investment in the greener sectors. I give just one example. Forest cover when Pakistan came into being was 15%, and today India has over 23% forest cover. In Pakistan, we remain almost at the same levels, almost 5%, but how can we expect these greener jobs more if we are not making investment in the greener sector? You have given example of China-Pakistan economic corridor. Unfortunately, this large infrastructure investment that we made, we did not care for nature, and ultimately we had to raise height of Mangla Dam to have more water availability. And if we are not able to make investment, mainstreaming environmental aspects in China-Pakistan in economic corridor, perhaps we are going to experience the same situation. Okay. What is your understanding and what is the finding that your book has? Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'll start if I may. You see, what is the inequality due to? I don't know whether you can hear me.
Mobile mic there.
Yes, it's fine. Actually, you have different stories. My own feeling is that Musharraf story is one of a kind of growth which was, for some years at least, relatively high, but there really was no concern for inequality. And it took place in an area, in sectors which are not labor intensive or skill intensive, and the end result is that we did see some growth, but the sharpest increase in inequality in the last 15 years was in the Musharraf era. More recently, somehow or the other, I get a sense that the growing phenomena of state capture by the elite is actually contributing to impoverishment of the people in the country. Particularly the laws. You look at the tax laws, it's amazing how much differential treatment there is of the more privileged segments of society. I have a whole section in volume 2 where I actually lay out each type of state capture and indicate how much that state capture means in terms of the amount of money that is preempted and perhaps even taken away from Pakistan. Now, as far as this fundamental question is, how can we get out of this low growth, high inequality trap? I'm so glad you asked this question, because I hope that will mean that you will begin to read our books. I will not give you a ready-made answer. The condition has to be that please look at these books, because they are written with a certain degree of humility and perhaps a love for our country. Please have a look at the 2 volumes and the work that my very capable colleagues are doing. Thank you.
Elite capture actually is something that runs through the entire work हमारा जो काम है, and I think वो 2-3 जो questions हैं उनका जो common thread है या theme है वो यही है. But by the way, elite capture is not 600 people sitting in parliament in Islamabad. Elite capture is those 6 or 5.5 million people amongst us who should be tax paying and are not tax paying, who should be voting and do not vote. So elite capture in that sense, we are very comfortable. So इसलिए Pakistan में one of the big issues we are facing is, and what my study tries to do is कि way forward पूछा था कादिर साहब ने और मेरे पास टाइम नहीं था, मैंने जवाब नहीं दिया कि ये रिफॉर्म कंस्टिट्यूंसी कैसे सीड करें हम, कि हम डिमांड करें रिफॉर्म्स इन पाकिस्तान. People are not, we are comfortable because we are not paying taxes, we are co-opted by the system, you know, हमें भी गाड़ियाँ मिल रही हैं झंडे की और ये सारा कुछ. So system knows how to co-opt people and it does it very well. So we do not have a reform constituency in Pakistan. So the elite is actually much larger than we tend to think, and we are part of the problem, many of us, rather than part of the solution. And that's what we need to do, change that and become part of the solution.
So thank you. I mean, just 3 things. I think Cheema Saab is right, actually. And of course, you would know SDP has done a lot of work on, in fact, pushing for environmental impact assessment of CPEC projects. This is something which we should do in the interest of our current and future generations. The second thing is that one of the key objectives of this book, and timeline is very important, is that some of these recommendations should go into the manifestos of political parties which are due to come in the next 2 months. You know, that's a key sort of expectation that we have.
Thank you very much. If I conclude by reading like Qatar, this मुशायरे में पढ़े जाते हैं, इनइक्वालिटीज़ की हवाले से आपकी दिलचस्पी होगी कि पहली दफ़ा एक वर्ल्ड इनइक्वालिटी रिपोर्ट जो है वो शाया हुई है महीना पहले तकरीबन. उसमें अगरचे पाकिस्तान का जिक्र उस तरह से नहीं है और इसलिए कि डेटा के हवाले से कुछ इशू है. दैट इज़ वाई इट इज़ वेरी वी आर वेरी हैप्पी डॉक्टर साहब कि दिस बुक इज़ हेयर to really supplement the world inequality report. आपको याद होगा कि एक किताब का जिक्र किया हमारे साकिब साहब ने, Why Nations Failed, और एक किताब मशहूर है थॉमस पैकेटी की, कैपिटलिज्म इन द 21st सेंचुरी. ये दोनों किताबों के ही मौज़ूआत हैं जिस पर हम यहाँ डिस्कस कर रहे हैं. दोनों किताबें जो हैं वो नई इकोनॉमिक थ्योरीज़, नई पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमिक थ्योरीज़ पर बात कर रही है, और इसी हवाले से इन किताबों की जो अहमियत है उस पर ग्लोबल डिस्कोर्स जो है वो शुरू हो चुका है। किसी साहब ने कहा कि इनइक्वालिटी कैसे ख़त्म होती है, अभी यहाँ पे एक किताब पढ़ी हुई है इस बुक स्टॉल में भी, कि एक तो इशू ये है कि एक मलाइन एक्शंस हैं जिसकी वार, जंगें हैं, कहत हैं, बीमारियां हैं, एक ये मलाइन है और कुछ बेनाइन है जो यहाँ जिक्र किए गए हैं, जो डॉक्टर साहब की किताब में भी जिक्र हैं, कि चाहे वो टैक्सेशन के रिफॉर्म्स हों, चाहे इंस्टीट्यूशनल रिफॉर्म्स हों, चाहे एजुकेशनल रिफॉर्म्स हों, ये यूथ का जो इशूज़ जो प्रॉपरली हाईलाइट किया गया है, आई थिंक दिस इज़ द की मैसेज फॉर अस। लास्ट थिंग, it is 2018 is very important because the readers of all these conditions which we have, inequality within the countries, which is very, very dangerous. This is the interesting situation for all those who are the reader of, or any reader of Karl Marx. And this is the 200th year birth anniversary of Karl Marx. I don't know if there is any session or reference in the Literature Festival this year, but these books are hinting towards that the inequality within countries are at a very high level. Very last comment about the books. The two books, it's a very good offer. If you buy one, which is Vaqar Saab's book, then you get two free, not one but two free. So that's the town of the deal of the town and deal of the Literature Festival. Thank you very much for your attention and hope that you would like reading these books. Dr. Saab will be available here. Authors will be available here if you would like to sign the books.